Hello, and welcome to Insider Insights. I'm Emma Wegner, Associate Educator in Public Programs and Creative Practice at the Met. In this series, we're providing closer looks at objects from the collection and exhibitions with Met experts. We hope you'll continue to join us as we debut each new video. Today, we're joined by my colleague, Julia Paratore, Assistant Curator at the Met Cloisters, who is going to tell us about a remarkable painting of a camel in the Cloisters Collection. Made in Spain in the 12th century, the image hints at medieval Spain's complex connections with the world beyond its borders. This interchange will also be one of the themes explored in an upcoming exhibition on the art of medieval Spain that will open at the Cloisters this summer. Thank you for joining us, Julia. We're so glad you could speak to us today.
Thank you, Emma. It's winter of 2021, and though the Met Cloisters is open to the public, it is not yet possible to give talks and tours in the museum. I miss sharing the Cloisters and its collection with visitors because I love hearing what everyone has to say about what they see. There's an artwork in the Cloisters' first gallery that really captures people's attention. And if I don't bring visitors over to it immediately, I will inevitably hear, why is there a painting of a camel here? The camel is instantly recognizable, even if the painter has shown this noble creature as a somewhat stylized figure, a simplified, streamlined version of the real thing. The painting is big, 8 feet high and over 4 feet wide. The camel is painted on the lower 3/4 of the field, shown in profile and facing right. The condition of the painting is not pristine, so you may notice that the surface looks worn, as if some of the paint has flaked off. The animal stands against a white background. There isn't a ground for it to stand on, and there's no setting, so we're really encouraged to just focus on it for what it is. The animal appears as a solid yellow ochre silhouette. Black and white outlines emphasize the different parts of the body. This is a tall camel with relatively long, straight legs. From its slender hindquarters, the bulk of the body gradually widens to a deep chest and a single parabolic hump. It's a dromedary, a one-humped camel. A second curved line nested within the arch of its back accentuates the shape of this most distinctive feature. The long U-shaped neck dips down as low as the camel's knees before rising, so the head is level with the shoulders. Short hairs stand out beyond the outlines of the animal's body, indicating the texture of its coat. The face is impassive, but a single large eye, accentuated with a wide brow line, looks right out at us, as if watching us as closely as we watch it. Overall, the sparing use of line and the confidence of that line's curves and swoops creates a really dynamic form. Just look at the camel's round feet, which seem to scoop upward, suggesting it's on the move, even though its knees aren't bent. I don't wonder about the appeal of the camel in the Cloisters. It's one of my favorite artworks in the collection. There's something playful about it, the way that it ambles forward, led by its extra long neck. I think that in itself is enough to ensnare visitors' attention and maybe make them smile. But as I've already indicated, the camel also tends to elicit a feeling of surprise. What is it doing at the Cloisters, a museum devoted to the art and architecture of medieval Europe? Camels are not indigenous to Europe, as we all know. When we think of medieval Europe, we think of knights on horseback, not camelback. Well, we'll see about that. Also, when you walk around the Cloisters, you'll notice that much of the art seems obviously religious. The very name of the museum, the Cloisters, makes reference to an architectural feature commonly found in medieval Christian monasteries. Beyond the 4 reconstructed cloisters on view, and you see one on the left here, the museum displays other medieval church architecture and decorations. Once you've seen that, you might be wondering, how does this painting fit in? And if you read the label accompanying the camel, you'll know that this painting originally came from a church. But it doesn't seem religious, does it? Again, we'll see. With all these questions, it's no surprise that the painting inspires a lively discussion when we're all in the galleries together. Though we'll have to wait a little while to have such discussions again, I can share some of the painting's history today, perhaps offer a few answers, and I'm sure raise yet more questions to be explored on another day. Currently, the painting is displayed alone on a wall. It can be taken off that wall and moved somewhere else in the museum, but this was not originally the case. It started out as a mural, a painting that was part of a wall, It was never meant to move around, and it was just one part of a larger group of images that worked together to communicate with viewers. These murals dedicated the church of San Baudelio de Berlanga, which is located in the region of Soria in northern Spain. San Baudelio was a monastery church, and so a community of monks primarily worshipped there, as well as a very small group of local lay people. The church building was constructed during the last decades of the 11th century. The box-like building looks fairly unassuming from the outside, but the inside is the exact opposite. This is a colorful, architecturally complex space. The center of the main chamber features one dominant architectural element, a thick stone column that extends upward to support a ribbed stone vault. The effect is very much that of a giant petrified palm tree that holds up the ceiling. The mural paintings were added during the 1120s or 1130s, a few decades after the church was built. They further enlivened the already architecturally interesting interior with deep, rich color, engaging figures, and lively ornament. Yet this relatively recent photograph shows the interior looking rather washed out because most of the paintings were removed beginning in 1922. This was no easy undertaking because as frescoes, the paintings were bonded to the wall surface. Removing the images meant removing a layer of the wall itself. Still, ghostly traces of the images remained on the walls, as you can see in this picture. Over the course of the late 1950s and early 1960s, the Cloisters acquired a group of 9 paintings from San Baudelio, which had been removed and mounted on canvas as separate units, which you see here. Shortly after their arrival at the Cloisters, however, 6 of the 9 paintings were sent back to Spain. The museum offered them to the Spanish government as part of a long-term loan agreement, exchanging the paintings for a 12th century architectural work, the Apse of San Martín de Fuentidueña. Today, the 6 paintings live in Madrid in the Museo del Prado. In San Baudelio, the Camel was located just behind the central column on a structure that divides part of the interior into 2 stories. At the Cloisters, the Camel is hung high on the wall, approximating its original placement above viewers' heads. We do not know exactly who built or decorated the church. The historical evidence suggests that a nobleman named Fortunio Aznares, who governed this area for a period of time during the 1120s and 1130s, commissioned the paintings. The painters' identities, in contrast, are completely unknown, which is not unusual when it comes to paintings of this time. Artistic practice of the day usually entailed that an entire workshop, a team of artists, worked on a large project like this together. The church's paintings were organized in 4 main layers around the walls. The 2 lower levels include images of animals, hunters, and fancy textiles. Scenes of the life of Jesus filled the 2 upper levels, from his birth on the vaulted ceiling to his adult life and passion just below the vault. The Cloisters also retains 2 panels from the church's upper level. One shows Jesus healing a blind man at left and raising Lazarus from the dead on the right. The second, below, shows Jesus' temptation by the devil. Depictions of Jesus' life and passion were commonly found in 11th and 12th century churches. Of course, since these subjects still form part of many churches' decoration today, perhaps it is easier to understand how these paintings fit into the setting at San Baudelio. They serve to inspire and offer hope of redemption. In contrast, animal and hunting imagery is no longer a staple of church decoration, but I assure you that depictions of animals and hunters actually abounded in medieval churches, even if they weren't always as big as they were at San Baudelio. Why animals? It is true that medieval people had more regular interaction with animals, both domestic and wild, than many people do today. San Baudelio had a picture of a bear, which you see at the upper right, and there were bears in the hills of northern Spain. So the image does hint at the earthly world beyond the walls, and a scary, dangerous aspect of the world at that. Perhaps stemming from lived experience, animal lore was also very popular. Stories about animals occupied the most sophisticated levels of intellectual inquiry, providing insight into moral and spiritual life. Animal symbolism emerged from animal stories and legends, many of which had no actual basis in nature, and different creatures could represent different virtues and vices as a result. From this, we learned that among other vices, the bear could symbolize lust or gluttony, while the elephant, who you see to the left of the bear here, and this is actually how they were originally displayed at San Baudelio, the elephant was a symbol of virtue, signifying self-restraint. I wish I had time to get into the question of how such symbolism came about, but there you have it. Medieval Christian books called bestiaries, which contained information about animals and the natural world that was freighted with moral and spiritual weight, were just one kind of resource that described the animal kingdom in such terms. Aligned with this tradition, camels could be symbols of humility, an idea developed by St. Augustine. The concept of humility is an interesting idea for the cloister's camel. Just think of the way its neck dips so dramatically. The very action seems to suggest that the animal is shrinking from attention as if it doesn't want to take credit for something great that it did. We could therefore view the camel as a model of appropriate behavior. Offering moral lessons, symbolic animals speak to earthly struggles, reminding the faithful to lead good lives and resist the temptations of sin. At San Baudelio, such a message complements the promise of salvation offered through Jesus that is represented on the church's upper story paintings. And also connected to biblical storytelling, I will point out that camels frequently appear in 12th century Christian art through pictures in illuminated Bibles. The animal itself could recall biblical history and evoke in Spain the far-off Holy Land. But there's another dimension to explore in better understanding the cloister's camel, one that takes us beyond the religious books that the monks might have read. For that, we must also dive into the political history and the broader art historical landscape of 11th and 12th century Spain. Doing so will help us to understand that the camel on the wall of the church was perhaps more than a symbol of virtue. At the time that it was built, San Baudelio stood in a border region in an area of contested authority, with many different authorities vying for control. This region, the Duero River Valley, cuts horizontally across the Iberian Peninsula. During the early Middle Ages, the river basin had served as a frontier between northern Christian-ruled lands and southern Muslim-ruled territory known as Al-Andalus. It is very important to understand that most of the Iberian Peninsula had been inhabited and ruled by Muslims for almost 4 centuries by the time that San Baudelio had been built. But by the 11th century, the Christian rulers living in northern Iberia had become more powerful, and their armies had begun to march on Al-Andalus, pushing the frontier southward and away from the Duero. At first, the Christians' territorial advances were short-lived, and the region passed back and forth between Christian and Muslim factions before finally falling under Christian rule during the early 12th century. The exact same time, San Baudelio also stood within a border region between 2 Christian kingdoms, Aragon to the east and Leon and Castile to the west. Aragonese and Castilian armies frequently clashed over this area too. San Baudelio's location within a frontier region had significant consequences for its appearance. On the one hand, a frontier or border is a place of separation, but it is also a place where different people meet and intermingle. As a result, San Baudelio's architecture is notably Islamic in many ways. Most especially, its magnificent vault with its ribbed extensions echoes the ribbed vaults of Islamic architecture. And here's just a most famous example from the Mosque of Cordoba. And it's not the most direct of comparisons, but hopefully you can get the concept in this comparison. We might see the adoption of architectural forms from Islamic Spain in a northern church as an act of appropriation, though we might also see it as a perfectly mundane consequence of frontier life, the result of sustained, active, interested encounters between people of different backgrounds. The mural paintings, added a generation later, respond to the other frontier that I just mentioned, that between Castile and Aragon, the 2 Christian kingdoms. Fortunio Asnares, the elite patron of the church that I mentioned earlier, came from Aragon. His time in charge of Berlanga represents a short-lived period in which the area had been seized from its rival, Castile. Though Aragonese political presence in the area would be short-lived, it would leave its mark in the form of San Baudelio's paintings, which were done by a workshop brought in from eastern Spain via Aragon. In contrast to the church's inspiration from Islamic architecture, the paintings represent a firmly Christian way of decorating the space. Even so, it seems that painters also took inspiration from the arts of the Islamic world. San Baudelio's selection of animal and hunt images recall the decorations of fine objects, such as silk textiles, metalwork, ceramics, and carved ivories, imported from Al-Andalus and beyond. During the early 12th century, Muslim-ruled Al-Andalus was the more economically developed, cosmopolitan, and cultured portion of the Iberian Peninsula. Elites of the Christian North and elsewhere in Europe prized the exquisite luxury goods produced in Andalusi urban centers. They obtained such precious items in various ways, whether through trade, via diplomatic envoys, or as the spoils of war or tribute. Animal and hunt motifs were overwhelmingly represented on such luxury items. Take a look at the decorative band above the camel, which I've cropped here. It shows two animals facing each other, separated by round frames. The arrangement strongly resembles the patterning of colorful silk Andalusi textiles, as you can see in a detail here. Two other sections of the mural from San Baudelio, originally displayed directly to the left of the camel, also mimic textiles, this time as full panels of trompe-l'oeil cloth that appear to hang on the wall. The circular patterns, framing eagles, resemble silks, such as this fragment in the Met's collection that you see on the right, which may have been woven in Almeria in southern Spain during the first half of the 12th century. Actual imported textiles like this were often used to decorate medieval churches. San Baudelio's animal and hunt imagery, together with this trompe-l'oeil textile, may have served to embellish and honor a sacred place through the evocation of smaller scale luxury items made of precious materials. In the same vein, some people think that the San Baudelio camel was copied from another picture of a camel, perhaps from an imported textile or ivory box, something like the 12th century South Italian example seen here. Well, I think that this is possible, just as it is possible that it could have been inspired by a picture in a Christian Bible. I also think that there's still more to it. Yes, the San Baudelio version of this animal is flattened and simplified, and its neck and legs seem exaggeratedly long, but these visual effects are very much in line with the painting style of the day. The tapering of the body at the hindquarters does accurately represent the body of a dromedary. The downward curve of the neck is also quite naturalistic despite its length. This makes me wonder if the artist could have seen a real camel and responded to the sight in paint. Of course, I can't say the same for the San Baudelio elephant, which has some of the tiniest elephant ears I've ever seen and distinctly camel-like feet, at least by San Baudelio standards, but then there was much less chance of the artist encountering an elephant on the Spanish frontier. Getting back to the camels, they are not indigenous to Western Europe, no, but they were brought to the Iberian Peninsula during the Middle Ages, carried by boat from North Africa to Al-Andalus. Though there isn't a lot of evidence for camel breeding in Spain, they certainly were used as beasts of burden along with horses and mules, and it seems not only in Muslim-ruled southern territory. The medieval chronicles that recount Christian kings' military victories over Muslim rulers indicate that camels were among the various spoils of war carried away from the defeated side, making their way to the Christian north. It is at least possible that San Baudelio's painters could have seen such a creature in person, perhaps for the first time ever, upon arriving in the frontier zone to work on the church. The painting thus also points to a historical reality, a political reality, enacted by Castilian, Aragonese, and Andalusi armies trying to gain the upper hand and grab each other's precious livestock, camels included. Even if the San Baudelio camel was interpreted by medieval viewers as a Christian symbol, its presence may result from the significance of the actual animal in the frontier region between North and South, a creature that passed from one army to the next in a series of wars that the Christians would increasingly view as sacred endeavors, as crusades. That last fact might have had another added significance, which we can ascribe to this camel captured in the San Baudelio mural. Overall, I think that the San Baudelio camel is important because the story of its creation, however imperfectly understood, reminds us that while borderlands might be contested places, they are also creative spaces. Frontiers are places where lands and peoples bleed together, perhaps literally as well as metaphorically. They are places for sustained encounters between different traditions. The combination of ideas resulting from these encounters lead to new forms, new possibilities, new stories. San Baudelio is certainly testament to that, and the camel perhaps more so than any other creature painted on its walls. Finally, I'd like to return to the surprise of the camel and the idea that it is somehow out of place, both at San Baudelio and at the cloisters, that it is an exotic addition to an otherwise homogeneous medieval land and a homogeneous museum by extension. The knowledge that San Baudelio existed within a frontier region should suggest to us that this painting, while it does represent a creature from a different land, also points to a historical reality in which camels roamed Spain. Camels may not have been an everyday sight in Berlanga, and ultimately they may have been associated with Al-Andalus more than with northern Spain. I definitely think that's the case, but the frontier was precisely a place where the recognition that something was different and other could paradoxically go hand in hand with the understanding that the difference was also mundane, familiar. We would do well to expand our understanding of the Middle Ages to include both the things that we think we know about it and the things that we don't, starting with the idea that a camel could be perfectly at home in a Spanish church. Thank you.